Something interesting is happening with the Bible. A recent Christianity Today article reported that Bible reading is increasing among young adults. And Bible reading among American millennials is up significantly. And while Gen Z still reads the Bible less than older generations, there are signs of growing interest. The article also noted something that caught my attention. Younger people may be interested in the Bible, but many of them simply haven't had someone teach them how to read it. That distinction matters. Interested in the Bible, but how to read it. Because being curious about the Bible and knowing how to approach it with confidence are two very different things. And maybe that's where you are. Maybe you're young and you never really read the Bible before. Maybe you grew up around church and you've been away from it for a long time. Maybe you have no interest in going to church or calling a minister and asking what you're supposed to believe. Or maybe you're not young at all. Maybe you're just curious. You've heard people quote the Bible. You've heard people argue about it. You watch people use it to support all kinds of ideas. And somewhere along the way, you've wondered, what does it actually say? If that's you, this podcast is for you. You don't have to belong anywhere to be here. You don't need a church background. You don't need to know the vocabulary. You don't need to know the church speak. You don't need to have already decided what you believe. Just come curious. Welcome to Unmarked Trail, approaching the Bible with fresh eyes. The idea behind the name is fairly simple. If you've never really learned how to read the Bible, it could feel a little like stepping onto an unmarked trail. You know there's something worth exploring. You may even know roughly where you want to go, but you're not quite sure how to navigate it. My hope with this podcast is not to stand at the trailhead and shout directions at you. I'd rather walk beside you. We'll slow down. We'll look carefully. We'll pay attention to context. We'll ask honest questions. And when we don't know something, we'll say so. My name is Don Hornsby, and we're going to walk this trail together. Years ago, I was teaching a Bible class at a summer camp in England. I had prepared a lesson for a group of teenagers, and there was excitement in the tent, and I knew what I wanted to teach them, and I had my material ready. And then, somewhere near the beginning of the class, I asked them to find a particular book of the Bible. And you know what? They couldn't find it. So I asked them to find another one. Same problem. And it dawned on me that these young people didn't really know their way around a Bible. They weren't being difficult and they weren't being uninterested. They simply hadn't been taught. So right there, on the spot, I scrapped the lesson that I had prepared. You have to be agile. And instead, we spent the rest of our time just learning our way around the Bible. What is the Old Testament? What is the New Testament? Where do you find Proverbs? Where are the Gospels? Where would you look for 1 Corinthians? We even turned some of it into a game. I would call out a name of a book, and they would race to see who could find it first. You know, it wasn't the class that I had planned, but I thought about that class many times since, because I had made an assumption. I had assumed that before I could teach them something from the Bible, they already knew how to find their way around the Bible. And we make that assumption a lot. We tell people they should read the Bible, but nobody ever teaches them how. And then they open it, they get confused, and they assume that the problem is with them. It isn't. The Bible takes some learning, and that's okay. Now, I've been reading the Bible for a long time now, decades really, but I can still remember when I first began to get curious about it, when I started asking my own questions and trying to understand it for myself, that I was looking back at that time and there were 3 things I wish someone had told me then. And I think they would have saved me some frustration, and they might have helped me approach the Bible with a little more patience and with confidence. So before we go any further on this trail, let's stop. Let's pause. Let me share those 3 things with you. I hope they will help you. First, the Bible isn't always easy to read. If you ever opened it up and thought, I have no idea what's going on here, welcome to the club. The Bible is ancient. Now this summer, the success of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey has been credited with an increased interest in ancient literature, and I applaud that. Copies of Homer's epic have been flying off the shelves, literally. But even in the best translations of the Odyssey, it can be a challenge to read. I was at a dinner party recently when someone admitted that they had a copy of the Odyssey sitting on the bookshelf, and they hadn't read it. But, as they put it, it looked cool on the shelf. The Bible may have a similar draw for some people, perhaps for you as well. It was written over a long period of time in cultures very different from ours, and in languages most of us don't speak. And even calling it a book can be a little misleading. It's really more like a library. There are stories, there are poems, songs, laws, letters. There's wisdom writings, there's prophetic writings, and some very strange apocalyptic visions. We'll get to those. Those different kinds of writing matter. You don't read a poem the same way you read a legal document, do you? You don't read a personal letter the same way you read a history book. And you shouldn't read every part of the Bible in exactly the same way either. Genre matters. Context matters. And we'll talk a lot about both of those things in the episodes ahead. But for now, I simply want you to know this. If the Bible has ever seemed difficult to you, that doesn't mean you're incapable of understanding it. Sometimes it is difficult to read. Now, the second thing I would like to share with you is that the Bible isn't always clear. Now, there are places where we can be pretty confident about what the writer means. And there are other places where thoughtful people have disagreed for centuries. And sometimes the most honest answer is, I don't know. I wish someone had told me earlier that those 3 words are allowed. I don't know. We don't have to manufacture certainty. We don't have to pretend that every question has a neat answer. Take, for example, the book of Job. Near the end, we encounter these strange creatures that are called Behemoth and Leviathan. What exactly are they? Now, there are theories. Some are more convincing than others, but ultimately, there are things we simply don't know. And that's all right. I've heard ministers and Bible teachers speak with tremendous confidence about things the text itself doesn't make nearly that certain. And I don't want to do that here. If something is clear, we will say it's clear. If there are several reasonable ways to understand something, we'll talk about them. And if we don't know, we'll say, we don't know. I believe that honesty is more useful than pretending, don't you? Now, the third thing I would like to share with you today is, don't simply take someone else's word for what the Bible says, including mine. Read it for yourself. That's one of the biggest goals of this podcast. I'm not trying to make you dependent on me. I want you to become a more confident reader. Years ago, a mentor gave me a phrase about teaching that has stayed with me. He said the goal wasn't to be the sage on the stage. Do you know what I mean? The one that stands up there and is the sage on the stage in front of everyone. No, the goal was to be the guide by the side. I've always liked that. And that's how I hope to approach this podcast. I've spent many years studying and teaching the Bible, and I'll bring that experience to our conversations. But I'm not interested in standing above you and handing down all the answers. I'd rather sit beside you. We'll look at the text together. We'll notice things. We'll ask questions. We'll slow down when we need to. And sometimes you may notice something that I haven't. That's part of reading together. So where are we going from here as I look down this unmarked trail? For the first few episodes, we're going to get familiar with the Bible itself. What exactly is it? How is it organized? Why does it contain so many different kinds of literature? It's a library, remember. Why does context matter? How do we approach something written thousands of years ago without automatically reading our own assumptions into it? We will learn some very simple questions that will help us along the way. These questions have served me well, and I think they will serve you as well. Questions such as, what does it say? What does it mean? And then, what should I do, think, or feel in response to what it says and what it means, what I'm reading? Once we've laid some of that groundwork, we're going to put it into practice. We're going to read a book of the Bible together. We'll begin with the Gospel of Mark. The reason is that Mark is relatively short, it moves very quickly, and it brings us almost immediately into the story of Jesus. We won't rush through it. I won't tell you what you're supposed to see before we start reading. We'll look, we'll observe, we'll ask questions, we'll pay attention to context, and we'll see what we find. There may also be times when we step away from Mark. Maybe we'll answer a listener's question. Maybe something happening in culture will raise an interesting question about the Bible. I want there to be room for that, because I simply don't want this to be a series of lectures. I want it to become a conversation. And if you have a question, or there's a passage you'd like for us to explore sometime, you can reach me at hello@unmarkedtrail.org. That's hello@unmarkedtrail.org. I'll be glad to hear from you. There's a story in the book of Acts that has been quietly sitting in the background as I thought about this podcast, and I've been thinking about it for a while. The Apostle Paul arrives in Athens. He's surrounded by temples and statues and philosophies and religions and ideas very different from his own. And instead of beginning by condemning everyone around him, he goes into the marketplace. He observes, he listens, and he talks with people. He begins where they are. I think the marketplace looks different today. Maybe it's a podcast. Maybe it's a phone in someone's pocket while they're walking or driving. Maybe it's someone listening while they're at the gym, or making dinner, or sitting at a desk, or lying awake at night with questions they'd never really known how to ask. That's where I hope Unmarked Trail can live. Not behind a pulpit, not requiring you to walk through a church door. Just here, a place where curious people can open an ancient book and learn how to read it carefully and honestly. You don't have to belong anywhere to be here. Just come curious. Now, some parts of this trail will be easy to follow. Some won't. That's all right. We don't have to pretend the trail is marked when it isn't. We'll walk it together. And one last thing. If this conversation has been helpful to you, and you know someone else who might be encouraged by it, I'd be grateful if you shared it with them. Maybe it's a son or daughter. Maybe it's a friend. Someone who's been curious about the Bible but never quite sure knew how to begin or where to begin. If you think this could help them to take that first step, I'd love for you to pass it along. And if you'd like to keep walking this trail with me, I hope you will follow the podcast so you will know when a new episode is released. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Unmarked Trail. Let's begin.